That tall, gangly thing?
Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by TFT Caster and retired co-host of the Little Legends podcast, Boop. Boop, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Oh, it's been a long time coming, my friend.
So for anyone who may not be super familiar with who you are, why don't you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Croup Booposaurus Lessard. No, my name is Chris Booposaurus Lessard, and I am a caster, not just for TFT, but also Overwatch. I'm also the managing director of a production company called Monkey Bubble. I've been casting for about 5-6 years, since 2016, which is kind of crazy to think about the fact that that's 5 years ago. Yeah, so casting, doing the business stuff now, and living the dream, playing some TFT, doing all that stuff. And been working on casting with Crowan, did a podcast with Blevins. I'm sure we'll get to all that. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, I mean, 5 years, that's nothing to sneeze at. Why don't you actually talk a little bit about your trajectory as a caster? Where did you start, and how did you actually end up in TFT?
So this is a long story, so everyone get prepared, buckle up, buckaroos. This is a good one. So esports is all about opportunity meets preparation, right? And it's actually crazy how many times I've heard this story, which is I saw a couple casters on TV at a Barcraft once, and I was like, this is really cool, and I think I could do that. Like, it was one of the first times I actually saw someone on TV, and I was like, I think this is, like, doable. You know what I mean? And I went ahead and, was thinking about it. And I talked to my, boyfriend, now husband at the time. And, I wasn't really thinking about it. Then we went to a Hearthstone tournament. And one of the casters didn't show up. And the guy who's leading the LAN was like, hey, does anyone here want to try casting? And my, boyfriend, now husband, was like, this guy does. And that's how it started. And that happened to be around the time that Overwatch was coming out. So through that, I casted Overwatch for a group called Clutch Gaming. Not the Clutch Gaming of like LEC and LCS fame, but it was the local LAN center with actually some pretty big names. Aimbot Calvin, who's a pretty big streamer now, was there. Got to meet all those guys. And then I went through Overwatch. I did shoulder content for Overwatch Contenders, which was the precursor to Overwatch League. And then I casted Overwatch Contenders from 2018 to 2019 for North America and Europe. And then TFT comes out, and I'm like, yo, Overwatch is cool, right? But everyone's got to pick up a second game. And at first, it was like, okay, we'll see what happens if this is even like a castable thing, right? It's a brand new genre. And then I started playing TFT, and Blevins and I got together, and we were like, yo, this game's really great. Let's like try to make something out of this. And then Blevins and I got our first casting gig off of our Little Legends podcast through Giant Slayer on one of the first fight nights. And that's how I ended up getting here in the end. A lot of help from people like Blevins, a lot of grinding and a lot of playing. But yeah, that's kind of the trajectory that it took for me to get here. I had to go through a whole other game first.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so cool to see how everybody has these different paths to all kind of get to a relatively similar place, with their place in esports.
Yeah.
And so you've kind of been at the forefront of casting in TFT esports, and really you've seen a lot of TFT esports develop over the last couple of years. Now, TFT has received a lot of criticism as an esport. In part, people say that it is not a great spectator game. Coming from your Overwatch background, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Okay, so that's probably the biggest piece of feedback we get in Overwatch, like all the time. It's just if you literally freeze a frame in Overwatch, it literally looks like a computer sometimes vomited onto the screen, right? There's so many pixels. There's so many, this, and that. Finding what's important can be difficult, right? And what TFT has, along with a ton of pixels, especially in the late game, right, is a pretty steep learning curve to start, in my opinion, particularly this set with all the items. And so I think TFT casting is in an interesting position where no one has decided what it was, right? Overwatch is a very specific style that everyone was kind of like trained to cast like. Everyone's kind of casting TFT like other things, right? Like Hearthstone, like Overwatch. You can do some really cool stuff, and I think it's more of an amalgamation of it all, and I think a good caster can make the spectator experience better. But I think you're right. The biggest problem with TFT is the fact is I've heard it called a second monitor game when you're watching it and spectating it, which in my opinion, can be okay, right? But a company doesn't want to be, second fiddle on your monitor. They want you to be paying attention and consuming that content, because the more your eyes are on that content, the more your brain might buy theirs, right? So the hardest part is the no spectator mode, and I think that's the easiest solution to the problem. But it's not just that. There's a lot of things that we aren't currently casting that we're not capable of doing. So I casted for the first time with access to all 8 streams, like just recently, and that's how far away we are from a spectator mode. Is when we were first starting doing the TFT casting, sometimes we'd literally just stay on one person the whole time and go through that. But I got to see, everyone was at the same XP at a certain level, and that's something that like we don't get to say truthfully, right? We can assume those things as casters, right? But now we can say, okay, because I saw this is true, and this is the feedback and the color commentary and all the hints that I could give you, because now we have the data, we have the numbers, right? We're not just going off of what Mort is telling us, right? And that'll take a lot of pressure off Mort. But as a spectator experience, I actually think it's BS when people say it's not a good one, because like all team fights can all be great. I think it's up to the casters to really drive that spectating experience for TFT, because all it is pixels without any direction, especially if you're first time consuming it. So, it's a matching game. For most people, for people like you and me, we're a lot deeper into what we want that to be. And that's where the problem is. It's how the game, I think, is packaged. Is this going to always be a secondary, put chonk everywhere, make all the content comedic? Is that the vibe that we're always going to get? Or are we ever going to get like that serious, competitive, the content we get is more like gamers in their crossed arms, right? Back to back. And the answer is no one knows what they want, because when someone puts out comedic content, it's the most popular of it all, but the players don't like it, right? And then when they put out serious content, no one watches it because no one understands it. So that's why it's hard to spectate. I don't think it has anything to do with like anything other than its identity, which is also I think Overwatch's issue too, to be completely honest with you. I think Overwatch, the MOBA versus FPS are obviously going through some changes for Overwatch 2, right? And I think that's kind of the same vibe, is like, okay, where are we, going to go next? We've been on a journey, right? But no one can make a decision on if this is a good spectator sport or not until there's a spectator mode. So maybe right now, it's like, it depends, right? And I really do think it depends on who the production is, who the people running the experience are, because it is drastically different between who the TOs are. But until we get a spectator mode, we don't have our official answer, and everything before that is just a guess or a hypothesis, because none of us are casting or experiencing this game at its peak without all of that information at our disposal, rather than just depending on a pro player to just, or your caster just remember that stuff, right? And work off of assumptions most of the time. I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, and I mean, thankfully, spectator mode is coming out. It's currently on the timeline for the in-person World Championships. Very exciting. We're going to get to that in a little bit, but before we do, I want to kind of move back in time to the Little Legends podcast. This is a podcast that you hosted. It's a podcast I credit personally for introducing me to the competitive scene. Has a very special place in my heart, and honestly was also a big reason why I started making content on my own. And so that drives me to the question: why do you think it's important for a scene like TFT to have all these different mediums for content, whether it's podcasts or YouTube videos or live streams?
Esports has one of the hardest times personifying players, right? So if you think about the NFL, maybe some people can name forecasting pairs, right? And maybe they go like super deep, but once you get to 2 or 3, once you get past like Joe Buck and Chris Collinsworth, right, that's pretty much it. When it comes to any esport, you could probably rattle off 10 to 20 casters, right? Just like in general. And I think esports is one of the few places where the more popular people might not actually be the people playing your game. It might be the people consuming and evangelizing it, right? So I think I think that's like one of the sorry, I'm losing track of where I'm going. I have so many thoughts, dude. on what this is. Can you repeat the question for me so I can
Sure.
get back on track? Yeah.
Yeah. So why do you actually think it's important for us to have all of these different formats and mediums for content?
So the personification is good because it gives them other opportunities to show themselves, because a player in a regular 8-person lobby, it acts very differently than if it's a 2v2v2v2, right? And I don't think we allow the players to be themselves. I think they feel like they have to be, this or that, because there's no guidance. This genre has never existed before. You know what I mean? So because of that, we need to give as many experiences as possible, not just to the players, but to the viewers too. And I think that's where, we could start talking about Europe and their access to TFT esports. But that's the biggest reason why you got to get out there, and why content is so important, is to familiarize yourself with the people, right? Which I think Giant Slayer's done really well in terms of the online personalities. And there's a reason why Giant Slayer is doing all of this correctly. You know what I mean? Like the way that they've set it up, the way that they're thinking about it, right? They provided a community event at first. It was Fight Night Rising, and now they're doing multiple games in multiple places. And it's because they created written content, YouTube content, player content, personality content, across all of these Riot fixtures. And it's not just the fact that they're making content, though. That's probably the most important thing. Any content creator will tell you a regular schedule will help you get viewers more than most things, in your personality. But yeah, what they're doing is they're giving every type of person an experience to connect with TFT, no matter who you are. And I think that just needs to happen more often from different kinds of voices, because while Giant Slayer's amazing, right? They can't do everything. They can't run the entire world's TFT tournaments, right? Maybe they can in like a year or two, but right now it's probably super difficult. So what can we do in the meantime? Well, we can support the other regions and help elevate them by doing the same exact thing. Right? We already have a working model with what Giant Slayer is doing, so let's just transition it over and provide those experiences for other people as well, because once that community came out, it was indestructible, right? And that's where people go to for information. Lobby 2 is there. More in everyone is there. And the more that is available, the more the players feel valued and seen, and the more the viewers feel like they know who their streamers are, right? That's why people like Soju are so popular. It's because, they're themselves, right? Or a magnification of themselves, and that's entertaining. And you got to let people see who that is, not a caricature like some of, I think, some of the comedic content in the past, or just or maybe just like, a teacher sitting in front of a class. Like, everyone's a whole person, and we got to do as much as we can to show that.
Yeah, I remember when I was interviewing Bunny Muffins, he had made the point about how TFT is actually not a very saturated place compared to some other games. There's actually a lot of room for innovation when it comes to content coming out. And like you said, I think Giant Slayer is an excellent example of a group of people who can come together and make some amazing content and then reap the rewards of being the first to do that.
Well, it's one of those things that, like, I think a lot of other people think, oh, other people must be doing that. Oh, if I have this idea, then someone else probably has the idea. And a lot of times, that's why people don't apply for jobs, or they don't go after these experiences. But in reality, when I have a casting gig open, people think I'm going through like 150 applications. I'm maybe going through like 15, right? And I think it's like the same thing, right? Everyone thinks that, oh, this, and that, oh, they're probably already doing it, or this, and that. But you know what? Just do it, right? If you have a content idea, just do it. The chances of you coming up with something totally different that's going to change the world are pretty low. It might happen, right? But innovation's not about coming up with something new, in my opinion. It's about changing something that already exists. And I think that's something that Giant Slayer really did correctly. They just did it, right? And they did it their way. And now they have the possibility of continuing to do it, right? Because instead of just thinking about doing it, they actually put pencil to paper and did it themselves. And I'll forever have respect for that company because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's transition now into kind of this hyper-focused esports of TFT. Set 5 World Championships are coming up in October. Before we get there, we have the mid-set finale coming up next week in NA. So something I wanted to ask you is, what are your thoughts on the NA competitive format in TFT?
I love Checkmate. I'm just going to put that out there. I think Checkmate is one of the coolest, the easiest ways to build the narrative that's ever occurred in esports. Like, as a caster, the Checkmate format is just, like, amazing. You might cast for a while, right? But at the same time, it's like, you know, sometimes you're casting stomps, right, in other games, and like it's kind of just going through the motions sometimes at the end. But in Checkmate, anything can happen, right? So in terms of format, I think it's been great. A lot of people have gotten opportunities. It's a total of 22 players that are going to be able to play during the med set finale, and you know, there's a last chance qualifier. Basically, I think it was pretty good what, you know, GS was able to do, because they were able to provide multiple ways of getting in, and the fact that if you don't get in, I feel like that's more on you, right? than anything else, at least how I see it here. We could talk about certain intricacies, but for this kind of first go, or like 1.5 go, I think they did a really great job in terms of providing NA some opportunities to really shine and start making roots in the industry, not just in TFT.
Now, there is something about this format that is different than Set 4, and that is the elimination of the open bracket. In Set 4, Set 4.5, Cloud9 and Team Liquid hosted these open brackets that any player could sign up, and if they had a great tournament run, end up in a qualifier. Whereas in Set 5, the only way to qualify is to be the open bracket equivalent is the Dawnbringer or Nightbringer Cup. Top 128 players who apply. Really, it means it's only open to Challenger, High Grandmaster, so it really rewards the players who are able to climb. Do you feel like because we don't have an open bracket, TFT is losing a bit of the accessibility that it's known for? We don't really have those crazy tournament run, a Masters or GM player makes it into a qualifier because of a bunch of great games that they have. Is there something that is maybe missing in this set?
Oh, man, that is a loaded question, because I have some spicy opinions on open brackets in general, because there's two different ways of thinking about them. The open bracket is a possibility of one of the best storylines to ever occur in sport. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing greater than an underdog story. I don't think there is one in terms of sports storylines, right? You've got Florida Gulf Coast. I mean, that's why the NCAA tournament is so popular, right? It's just, you're gonna get an underdog story just by the way that it works, right? However, that is not how it works in TFT. And as someone who is kind of in the community, what I've noticed in every single open qualifier I've ever casted, and I've casted a bit, is not one person under Challenger has ever won, right? And I think one time I saw a silver player, and I was pretty sure it was a Smurf, right? So this is kind of like a thought experiment, right? Because the chances are so low, are you going to invest in an entire tournament, right, for the potential of this happening, right? Are you going to spend the money, to do something off of a potential, right? And open brackets also have a lot of people who've never been in tournaments before, and will and those tend to take a really long time. And I've never really seen the run happen, right? That doesn't mean it will never happen. Of course, crazier things have happened, right? Especially in the NCAA tournament. But the open bracket does serve a community that I think TFT has that a lot of other people don't, which is older people. I think I meet a lot of people in TFT with kids and families and like household responsibilities. You know what I mean? And so
I do.
That is, new dad, right? And I think that is what the open bracket is for those people who can't spend the time to grind and get to Grandmasters, but are totally good enough to be great GMs, right? And so I think the idea of, what if the silver player is going to come up? I'm like, yeah, that's amazing, but that's also being like, what if an asteroid hits the Earth? What do you got to do, right? And, like, the chances of it happening aren't zero, right? But I think the open brackets are more for people like you and Bryce, right? That just don't have as much time, right? But are totally good enough to compete with this crowd anyway. And so that's what I'm really, really missing, is those gems that force you to be like, am I going to raise a family, or I'm going to be a professional esports player, right? That's what I want you guys to think about. Because I think they're just trying to say, hey, we're the people that we're serving, the people that are here, people who play this game professionally, that stream this game for 8 to 12 hours a day, right? Like almost every name here does that. But that's not everyone who plays, and that doesn't mean you're also good at the game. Right, there have been plenty of streamers at tournaments. Like there's a 1K tournament, which was a clothing band earlier, and I don't think any of the streamers. Oh, GV8 won, but that was pretty much it in terms of the streamers that got invited. So that's not even a sure thing. So the more the merrier, if you can. Right, and I would love these open tournaments for people like you and for people with families and who don't have opportunities to like grind every day, but might get 3 to 4 or 1 to 3 hours a day to do it. But yeah, that's kind of my take on the open tournament. It's not for the silver player. It's for the GM who's totally good enough to compete and give you that opportunity to do it on a weekend.
Yeah. Now, all right, let's forget about the disgruntled boomer that I am and move on to the players who actually qualified for the mid-set finale, right? We've got an incredible cast of the best players in North America competing at this tournament. Last time we saw a tournament this big, there were some wild runs. What I want to know are, what are your predictions for the mid-set finale?
Okay, so I think there are some very obvious answers here, right? So I'm going to try to go not obvious and go with someone that I recognize from Fight Night. I have 2 people for you, and I think this is going to be very like meta dependent, right? So I think the Jirachi is at the ready, kind of like Sphinx breakout at some point. They have been there for so long now, right, that eventually they're going to have the moment, right? However, the Jirachi is best in early game metas where you can build attrition early on. Like they like having 100 HP for as long as possible and then kind of just getting the top 3, right? So if that's a friendly area during that time, I think the Jirachi could be good to go. And I actually think that Anikoi Nico is very, very good in terms of, we've seen him in Fight Night Rising one time. Also, great stream, will help you out a lot for a little bit of a surprise. But I think the coolest thing is the fact that I believe Pakigam and Goobums actually play together really frequently, and they both qualified through the Challenger Series. And both of them, I think, are inconsistent, but when they're playing well, right? I mean, the results are there. So yeah, those are kind of like my 4. If I were to pick a winner though, out of everyone here, I would probably go, I'm going to go and be boring and probably go GV8 because I think it's time for one of these streamers to like win one of these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like whenever we have a tournament like this, there's like 3 sections of players. You have your big streamers, right? Your Soju, your GV8. You have your top of the ladder Challenger Series. You have your Goobums, your Pakigam, those people. And then you have your tournament runs, which that's your Iniko, who's a top scorer at Dawnbringer, Jirachi, who was one of the highest scorers at Nightbringer, right? These people who were just able to put on tournament performance. And so you kind of get to see, even though someone is top of the ladder, does that translate into a tournament? Even though someone's able to have one tournament run, will it translate into another one? There's all these questions up in the air. Really interesting to see that dynamic actually play out.
Yeah, ladder play I feel like is notoriously harder to transition into tournament play for. Like I'd rather be a tournament player doing poorly on ladder than being number 1 on ladder, not doing great on tournaments. You know what I mean? So I definitely value tournament experience a lot. And what's really funny is a lot of the streamers have less tournament experience than people like Pakigam and Goobums, right? Who are on Fight Night Rising and did a lot of set 4 qualifiers together. So yeah, and then you've got people like Spencer who, again, right, can bomb out or win. Yeah. Right. Very first or 8th kind of styles. So, yeah, this is exciting. The coolest thing about this is, like you said, there's such a general mix of players. I call this kind of like a boggle of players. In Boggle, you just like mix everything up and you see what you get, right? And I feel like these lobbies are going to be kind of like that once we do get in there, because there are some names I don't recognize, and I'm sure a lot of people were surprised about, and sometimes those are the ones that win. So we'll see.
Yep, we'll definitely see. And so at this point, you've been on the mic for so many different events, Fight Night Rising, Challenger Series as well. What I'd love to know are, what are some of your favorite moments from casting TFT?
Okay, so number one, one of my favorite movies. I'll do like a personal one and then like a player one. So
Okay.
in terms of like my favorite interview ever, it was last Cardax the very first time because he came on with this energy. Because esports interviews are like notoriously difficult. Because sometimes you're like, whoa, you come in with like this energy, right? You're like, oh my goodness, great game. You must be feeling amazing. Walk me through the decision to play this during that lobby. And they're like, it's good. Okay, yeah. And so that is always like a thing. And what's actually really awesome is that I don't think has happened in Fight Night, which it was funny because my friend Lemon Kiwi from the Overwatch world subbed in for Fight Night, and she was like, they talk to you? Right? It was like, because I also think it's because they're older. But yeah, I love interviewing people for TFT because I always feel like they're just such experts and so smart. You know what I mean? My favorite casting moment has got there's a couple that come to mind, and they all always equal like a very intense emotion. But there was a Fight Night Rising that ended 1-1. There was 1 HP each. And a dream, and it was the very last round, and it was for the win. And in terms of just like what that felt like to cast something like that was super cool. And then honestly, the next thing is supporting a lot of these players in their careers, like seeing them go from Fight Night, being able to like root them on, and seeing names like the Jirachi and Goobums and Pokygum at these bigger tournaments, and being like, I knew them when they were in little Fight Night Rises every week. you know what I mean? And so, yeah, I think in terms of my favorite highlights, that's got to be it. And of course, my casting partners. Like, I literally look forward every Fight Night because I just love Crowan. Right? Crowan and I vibe super hard, which a lot of people find surprising because we're very, very different. But the overarching theme is that I vibe with Crowan super hard, and casting with him is like one of the highlights of my week. So there's a little bit of a cop-out answer since I said a lot. And of course, the thing that made me most angry was when I saw Lux 1v1 a Mordekaiser a little earlier this month, before the B patch.
Yeah.
And Crow and I are like notoriously good at picking out overpowered things, too. So it's a nice little ego boost as well. But that's all casting for you. It's a little bit of ego. Most casters like attention, right? Most casters are opinionated. Most casters just want the game to succeed because they love it. And I definitely, fall into that latter category. I love this game, and I just want it to do well.
Well, so bouncing off of that, what are your long-term plans with TFT? Would you want to cast TFT full-time? Would you always want to split your time between different games? What does that look like to you?
I have the most fun casting this game. There's no doubt about it. I love casting Overwatch, but I've definitely moved into the business side of things there. I mean, part of it is like I was flown out to LA casting, and I had my chance. Right now, I took my hits, and now I'm helping the next generation get in there too, and hopefully avoid some of the hits that I took. Something I say all the time is I've been hired and fired by Blizzard 3 times. So if you want to know how to do each, let me know. Just hit me up on Twitter. I can help you get into esports. But I think that I would love to cast TFT for a very long time. This game is cool. All of the people in it are cool. The other casters are awesome. I just vibe with a lot of the people in this industry, in this particular community a lot. So yeah, I mean, I guess the answer is yes. I hope that TFT is a major part of my casting career as we move forward, and hopefully I get some of these, events as we move forward, and we can start traveling and stuff like that. That'd be sick. That's the dream, right?
Absolutely
and over COVID, I think I kind of was like, this isn't real anymore. Like, I just didn't think about it. You know what I mean? Now I got to kind of get it like revved up again and be like, all right, it's time to hustle. So you'll be seeing a lot more of my streams. You'll be seeing a lot more content and stuff like that coming from me because, I'm going to put myself into the conversation and hopefully be a part of it, on some of these other events as we move into the future.
Awesome, Boop. Awesome. Well, so that's everything I have for you. Before we go, is there anything else you want to shout out?
congratulations on being a dad. I know it's
Thank
a
you.
little past due, but this is the first time I've gotten to say it face to face. How's that going?
It is incredible and tiring and wonderful and beautiful and exhausting, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It's amazing.
You know, every dad, their cargo pants will just
That's right.
multiply.
My
After a
time
while.
will come.
Yeah, eventually you're gonna have to wear those cargos because you just won't have enough space. But yeah,
That's
well,
true.
it was absolutely wonderful coming on here and just chatting, you know, being real. And if you want to find me on Twitter, it's at Booposaurus Rex. I cast Fight Night Rising with Krillin most Thursdays. We're taking a little bit of a break after this week because of the mid-set finale, I believe. But other than that, you can find me casting a lot of TFT stuff if you're looking around or looking on my profile. And I'm serious, if you want to try to get into casting or if you're interested in anything esports, hit me up. I will help you out.
Thank you again, Boop, for coming on, and thank you everyone who's watched this interview all the way through. For more TFT coverage and esports content, make sure to subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.